Welcome back to another episode of the Sky Society podcast. Today, I am chatting with Jena Sullivan. She is the Senior PR Manager at Semrush. Welcome, Jena.
Hi, Natalie. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for coming on. Very, very excited to go through your journey. And a lot of this episode, we're going to talk all about PR. Like, this is definitely our theme for this episode. So I'm super excited to dive in and get into the dirty details, not so dirty, but fun details of your career journey to where you are now and your advice you have for women in marketing and PR. But before we jump into all of that, can you share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, my name's Jena Sullivan. I'm the Senior PR Manager at Semrush. A little bit about me before I got into this role. So I'm originally from the Chicago suburbs, born and raised here. I went to college at Illinois State University, where I majored in public relations and business. Shortly after that, I got my first job at a B2B tech PR agency in Chicago called Walker Sands. Worked there for a few years. And then in the last year and a half, I switched over in-house. So now I'm at Semrush, and it's been a really great experience. I love my team. Yeah, just really great.
Amazing. Yes, I am a huge fan of Semrush, and we use Semrush at Sky Society. So definitely love the company you are at now. So you've been in Chicago pretty much your whole life. You went to, or in Illinois, you went to Illinois for school. I have to ask you before we get into all the career stuff, because I love pizza and I'm always going back between New York and Chicago style pizza. So what is your favorite place for pizza in Chicago?
So I would have to say, when it comes to deep dish, which I know is what Chicago is known for, I think my favorite is Lou Malnati's, but I don't personally discriminate against any pizzas. I love all pizza as well. I feel though like it's funny because I think a lot of people just assume like we eat deep dish pizza all the time. We have other pizza too. So like my more traditional favorite pizza is a place called Salerno's, but a lot of great food in Chicago. So if you have never been here, definitely come check it out, because besides just pizza, we have a lot of great restaurants.
But I feel like there's so many stereotypes of what people eat depending on where they live. Like, I imagine people think like, if you live in California, you must eat salads like all day, every day. And if you like, I'm in Texas, and I was like, oh, people in Texas just eat barbecue and like fry like all the time. And so I don't, the stereotype for Chicago is definitely the deep dish pizza. I've been to Illuminati's. It is definitely like amazing. A lot of people will tell you too, that's the deep dish spot in Chicago. I was there over New Year's and I had it again, and like, yeah, never disappoints. But then crust pizza too. I feel like if you eat deep dish pizza all the time, it also gives me like the most intense stomach ache. So I feel like then crust pizza for like feeling good after too is probably the way to go.
Yeah, I feel like it's like, I mean, if you live here, it's like every couple months, if that. Not because it's not great, but like you said, like that's a lot.
It's an experience.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Austin, and same with barbecue. Like, there's this, if you ask, anyone in Austin, where's the best place for barbecue? They'll tell you like two places, and one of the places, Terry Black's, is like right next to me. And so whenever my family comes and visits, we always go, and they're always like, this is so good. How often do you come here? You must come here all the time. And I'm like, only when you guys visit.
Only when there's people, tourists.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not going here and like waiting in line. Like, it's just, yeah, not the food that you eat every day, but definitely a nice treat to enjoy. Okay, so your career is, you kind of walked us through a little bit of your history. It's very PR heavy and focused, and you've built up a lot of experience through the years. But looking back, how did you decide you want to pursue a career in PR? Was it accidental? You kind of just like got a job in it? Was it intentional that you knew you wanted to be there? Or how did you decide this was the path for you?
Yeah, so I actually didn't even know what PR was. I was actually in school for nursing. And it wasn't until like the summer going into my senior year that, I don't know, just one day I woke up and I was like, I don't really know if this is for me. And I was really nervous to tell my parents, because I was like, I'm literally going into my senior year of college. Like, how am I going to graduate on time? And they were really supportive. But basically, I like spent about a week where all I did was like talk to different people that I was friends with at school. Like, I talked to people in different majors. I did a ton of research just to figure out like, okay, what other careers are out there that are, more aligned with like what I'm really passionate about and things that I'm good at. And I had a girl that was in my sorority in college, and she was super involved in PR. And I kind of sat down and chatted with her, and I was like, okay, so what exactly is PR? Because I mean, you see on like TV shows and stuff like publicists, but like, I mean, I'm now in B2B tech PR. So like, it's not something that I think the average person just like knows what it is. So I had a really great conversation with her, and I was like, okay, I think this is something that like I'm leaning a lot more towards. And so I ended up switching majors. It all worked out. And then from there, because I was a little bit late to being in PR, I think something that was really important was having internship experience. And so in my senior year, I tried to find different PR opportunities and jobs that were related. And I ended up doing a lot of internships that were like writing related, social media related. And I think a lot of those skills kind of helped me prepare for when I ended up getting a PR internship after graduation. So from there, yeah, kind of just worked my way through a few different internships and then ended up getting hired on at the agency that I ended up working at as my first job.
What a crazy little story that you went through there. I can only imagine how scary it was to just like wake up and be like, okay, I'm going to switch the thing like I've been in school for, and making that decision. I can only imagine the fear around that and just like, is this the right choice? And I love that the way you went about figuring out PR was asking someone like, what do you actually do? Because you're so right where, and especially this I don't know if school systems are like different, but I know in the US, like you go to high school and then you pick a path and you have to go study that. And it is like you basically just kind of pick it. I feel like a lot of times based on like people around you that that maybe have a job or industry, or like what your parents say is like, okay. Like I had parents that were very like, you should go into like the, big like business or science or lawyer, that's where you're going to make money and where you should be. And so there's a lot of unknowns around the other different areas that you can go into. And so like sitting down and talking with that girl and being like, what do you actually do was just such a great decision. I'm going to go into that for a second, but I also wanted to know, was there a lot of fear? Like, how did your family feel about you switching, or kind of how did you get over like, this is a really big risk to kind of change everything? And then, like you said, now I have to go catch up and get all these different internships.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was not an easy decision. I was actually like weeks away from starting my clinicals. I had my scrubs and all like,
oh my gosh.
I had everything already like ready to go. And I don't even know what it was. I was just kind of like, I always had been really good at like reading and writing in English growing up. And so I probably should have leaned more into that anyways when I was choosing a major. But like you said, like when you're first entering college, you have no idea. I mean, you have some people that are like, have known their entire life. So I want to be a teacher, or I want to do this. But like a lot of the more specific jobs out there, like PR, you don't just learn that like growing up. So for me, I didn't really know. And I kind of was like, well, like being a nurse is great. And like, I got into the program, so let's just roll with it. And so, yeah, I mean, it was definitely very scary. But like I said, my parents were like, this is the rest of your life. So you need to figure out something that, you love, that you want to be doing every single day. And so they were supportive. And basically, I went to my counselor and I had to cram a bunch of classes in summer school so that I would be able to graduate on time. And I know, like, I mean, you can take whatever amount of time you want, but I was really set on still graduating on time. So I worked with the counselors, got all the classes I needed, and did like full semesters of summer courses. And I was just thankfully able to get all of the credits in that I needed. But it was tricky too, just doing all of that, like those courses and catching up and trying to find an internship, because a lot of people who were already in like the PR program at my college, they were already very involved in like clubs and organizations, and they had internships over the summer at like agencies that were in big cities. And so I was very behind going into it. So it's actually another interesting thing. When I first graduated, I really wanted to work at an agency. I had toured a bunch of them when I was in PRSSA, like the last semester I was in college. So I toured a bunch of agencies in Chicago, and I was like, this is what I want to do. And what they don't really tell you is that you need like agency experience to get in an agency. And so I tried really hard when I first graduated to get an internship at an agency, but there were a lot of people already like a year or two ahead of me that had done it over the summer and the years that I was still in the nursing program. So I actually found a job at my old high school being a cheer coach. They randomly had like a position open, and I was like, I need something on the side that is going to let me have the flexibility to interview for all of these like internship interviews at these agencies. And so I did that the first few months after graduation. I was like coaching cheerleading on the side, getting paid to do that, but it allowed me to go into the city whenever I needed to do the interviews. And then I was finally able to get an unpaid internship at an agency that then set me up to get the paid version of the internship the next like quarter, or it was like the winter program. So I did like a bunch of different things to get there, but then I ended up getting hired from like within at Walker Sand. So it all worked out for the best, but it was definitely a very long process and a lot of like figuring out a lot of crazy things along the way.
Yeah. Wow. That is a lot that you had to do in order to make this happen. I think it's one, I'm like hopeful that you can absolutely change your mind. I feel like what you described of like, I went to school for this, and then I like got into the program. So like, of course I was going to do it. It's kind of like a lot of us become passive, right? We're no longer like the ones driving. Like we're just like kind of like sitting in the passenger seat and just letting like momentum like take us through without being intentional on where we're going. And so you kind of then, I guess, for whatever reason, woke up and was like, okay, wait, this actually maybe isn't for me. But then in order to start, there's a lot of catching up you had to do. And I know getting experience is definitely the hardest part about getting into the marketing industry. There's so many girls that are on the job hunt and they couldn't do an unpaid internship, or they didn't know they had to get an internship, or they just decided later that marketing was for them. They don't have any of this experience. And so I feel like that is definitely the hardest part of all of it. You mentioned that you first got an unpaid internship that turned into a paid, that then turned into a job. For that, like first, like getting that unpaid internship, and you had no experience in PR at that point, how did you position yourself for that role?
Yeah. So, well, I also would just say too, is like when I was doing that cheerleading coaching thing, which is like, it was a great experience, but I did that on the side so that I could do the unpaid internship, which was crazy. And I just say too, like for anyone trying to get that first internship, don't be discouraged and be okay with having to work a different job, even if it's not your first dream job out of college, because it'll pay off in the end if you like, you really want to end up somewhere to take, the different jobs that will end up leading you there. But I would just say like, be super persistent. I had a long list of like every single agency in Chicago, everything from like in all the suburbs near where I had lived at the time. And like, I think just putting yourself out there, and like, I did everything that I could, like not having had previous experience. So I played up the skills that I did have, even if they weren't directly PR related. So like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I did a couple of months internship doing social media and writing. And so when I'd create my resume, when I was applying to that first internship, I'd really call out the skills that are really important in the PR industry. So even though I didn't have that direct PR experience, just calling out some of the softer skills or some of the, personal qualities that I had that would make a good PR professional. That was just something I really focused on going into those interviews and preparing to apply to those different jobs.
Yes. And I think too that a lot of companies, when you don't have experience, they will respect your work ethic. And a lot of them are looking for someone that's like willing to put in the work. So I also can imagine that you came in with a lot of energy of like, this is really what I want to do and I want to make it happen. And I think that is very underrated as well, because I think a lot of companies too are understanding like you are in school, can't expect you to have all of the experience. I know a lot do, and I definitely hear a lot of complaints from girls that say that there's an entry-level job and it wants 5 years of experience and it wants to pay. Like, so I know there's both ends, but very interesting to hear how you got your start in a very non-traditional way.
Yeah.
Which we love on the Sky Society podcast, because that is what we are all about. So you did this crazy time where you were doing this side job plus doing the internship. This eventually turned into a paid role, which then turned into a full-time role, and how you got your start in the PR industry. So if there is someone, right now who is looking to get into the PR industry and maybe, they're in a spot where they don't have a ton of experience, are there any skills they can focus on cultivating, or, anything they should do for a portfolio, or anything they can do right now to help them stand out in the job application process?
Yeah, I would say in terms of skills, it kind of sounds silly because I would say communication and your communication skills will really help you prepare for the role. And like, obviously, like you're in the field of communications, but what I mean by that is like being able to like start the job and be able to like communicate with everybody that you're working with, whether it's asking smart questions or, sharing ideas and not being afraid to speak up. So I think just working on those skills before you enter a first job. But I'd also say when, you're looking for jobs, um, other skills that you can work on is writing. So if you have previous writing experience, whether that was in school or if you can find like a freelance opportunity to do something like a press release, or even to draft a press release, even if it isn't for something, just so that the employer that you're going to hopefully catch their attention, they can kind of see the skills that you already have. And I'd say definitely writing is a really big part of any job you're doing in PR.
Yes, I agree. And I think focusing on figuring out what you can do in that, what you can do to build communication skills that you can show employers do, like doing a mock press release or anything written. I always love saying that starting your own blog is a great experience too, because it gets to show the employer that you actually love writing. And this is like communicating something that you are passionate about and you're doing it on your own. And that's a way to create experience for yourself where you get to write about something that you love. So yeah, I always like sharing little things where people can do something at home, because a lot of girls are like, I will do anything to get the job. I'm just having a hard time getting the first step. The first step is always the hardest step. All right. So now you are the senior PR manager for Semrush. Can you tell me, well, first, can you explain what Semrush is for those of us who don't know? And then can you explain a little bit about what your job looks like?
Yeah. So the basic description of Semrush is we're an online visibility platform, but in simpler terms, what we do is we help small businesses. So people that, run their own small business or are bloggers all the way through companies that are, in the enterprise. So all size businesses, basically what we do is we offer them different marketing tools to help increase their online visibility. So helping them get seen online. So different offerings that we have is, we have a lot of SEO offerings, content marketing. So a large marketing toolkit that really, helps people and business owners really get seen online so that they can really attract their different target audiences.
And yeah, so like I said before, we love Semrush. We use it all the time. We use specifically more so like the SEO features, and it's the tool that we train girls on in our accelerator when we teach our SEO modules. We teach them all how to use Semrush. Super fun tool. And also Semrush has a lot of awesome like video resources too for like learning about like online visibility, which is great. So you went from nursing to B2B software PR, which is a very, very big shift, which I'm sure is not something that you expected to be in. So what does your role now look like, or what does it look like to be the senior PR manager for Semrush?
Yeah, so I would say every day is pretty different, which is something that I love. That's kind of what I, really enjoyed just first starting out in PR, is that every day is different. Everything, is constantly moving at a really fast pace in the PR industry. So on any given day, I could be doing something from, drafting a pitch and building a media list and sending that out to reporters. But then I'm also doing a lot of different things like communicating and collaborating across teams. So whenever there's new products coming out or a big announcement that we want to share, I'm able to work with a ton of different people outside of just the PR team to understand what those announcements are and figure out how we can best support them from a PR perspective. We do a lot of really cool things with data. So Semrush has a lot of really great data capabilities. We're able to look at things like Google searches, cost per click data, web traffic data. So just using that data to help craft really interesting stories to pitch to media and to create content for our newsroom, which we actually just launched a brand new version. If you haven't checked it out, you should. It's really great. But, helping just craft different stories. So whether they use data or use different points of view from some of our experts at Semrush. So kind of all different aspects of PR, but no day really looks the same. It's kind of as different things come up, the PR team helps support and figure out how we can get the most awareness in media for Semrush.
So everything around, like you said, communication and really figuring out how to, I think I've interviewed some other guests in the PR space, and it's I don't know if it's funny, but it like PR is communication like at its core, and like more so than anything else. And so it is also really interesting how much it matters. And I think a lot of times we take messages for granted. Like you may see a brand come out with something and you may read it and not really think about it, but there's so much thought and intention that goes behind it. And I think that is what is so special about PR. And so if you are someone, or maybe you can speak to this more of like who PR is really good for, but if you are someone that, you know, is really good at that piece of that communication piece, then I feel like PR is just such a fun place to be.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love it. That's why obviously I'm in PR, but kind of all the things that you said, that's exactly why I really am passionate about PR, and I'm glad I, made the switch for this to be my career instead of the other route that I was going to take.
So what is your favorite part about your job now?
I would definitely say the people at Semrush are really awesome. So we have a really great culture here, but I think there's just an overwhelming amount of support from everyone. So even though, I mentioned a lot of tasks that I do on a day-to-day basis that are PR related, we are really encouraged to do things that we're really passionate about that aren't directly related to, what I do day to day. So for example, like we're really working on expanding into the B2C space, and I have a predominantly B2B background. So just being able to kind of raise my hand and get the support where I can actually help on those different projects that we're doing. So just, the support to be able to experiment and try different things out isn't, always a thing at companies. So I love that I'm able to do things that I love, not just, what's in my like role traditionally. And yeah, just everyone's really great to work with. So I just love being able to log on every day, and like everyone I work with is so smart, and it's great to just collaborate with such a diverse group of people too, because Semrush is a global company. So, every day we're working with people from all over the world in different countries. And so I really love that aspect as well too.
Company culture is so important when it comes to loving what you do. Like it's just so, so, so important. And when I think back at my favorite jobs, it had very little to do about what the company was or like the product we sold, and like very much to do with how much I liked my boss and my employees and how much I felt supported. And I always love reminding people that, because I think especially in marketing, it gets really easy to want to work at the big flashy companies or to work at brand, whatever fashion or beauty brands. But at the end of the day, what really makes the job enjoyable, that you're with your coworkers 8 hours a day, right? You are working, for so much. And so to be able to be in an environment where you feel supported, be in an environment where you feel like you have to pursue your passion, to be somewhere where you feel like you like who you work with is so important. Did you know that when you interviewed for Semrush, was that something that you knew going into it when you were interviewing, like, oh, wow, they, have a great company culture? Or was it something that you figured out later on, like once you got into your role?
Yeah, I mean, I was familiar with Semrush, and I had seen a lot of the social media content actually on like Twitter and LinkedIn. So just having worked in the tech space already, I was familiar, and I was like, oh, like they always have really funny tweets. And so like going into it, I'm like, oh, this seems like a fun company. But until I actually, onboarded, and well, I guess a little bit before onboarding, but when I was interviewing just with everybody, they all just had like a really amazing attitude about the role and the company. And so I was like, okay, like we'll see when I get there if it's really like this. And then ever since I joined, it's the culture really is great, and everyone's just so positive, so supportive. And the other good thing is like you feel really encouraged to work with people regardless of their title, whatever level they're at. Like everyone just really wants to achieve really great results and to work together. So it's nice to just be able to reach out to anyone at every level and feel like you have their support and that you can work together to get whatever it is you need done.
Yeah, the reason I ask that is because I know sometimes, people get into a role and then they realize like, this is like a toxic work environment. This is like not what I wanted. But like you had mentioned in the interview process, I think it's so important to also be like interviewing the company and being like, do I actually enjoy the people interviewing me? Do I feel like I'm connecting with them, instead of being like, do they like me? Do they like me? Do they like me? But like, do I actually like them? Because there's so many people that make that mistake and then they get into a role and they're like, wow, this is like not the company culture or not the environment I thought I was signing up for.
Yeah, and I'd say too, like when you're going into an interview, I would not only come with questions related to the job, but think about what kind of culture it is you want, what are the qualities you want, and I wouldn't be afraid to also ask questions that aren't directly related to the role. So like just an example would be like, what do you like to do for fun? Just to see like if they have like similar interests, if it's someone that you'll get along with, if you can kind of figure out like what matters to those people, and if there's like a culture and a personal fit as well when you're joining a team, especially in PR. A lot of the teams are usually pretty small, so you want to make sure there's a fit there so that you can not just get your work done, but also make sure like you're able to collaborate and work together, and that it's a good match when you're going into a new role.
Yeah, I like that question. I feel like that could be a fun question, like to ask of like you ask all the questions related to the job, and then at the end it's like, well, we've been talking about work so much, like what do you guys do when you're not working, or like what does the after work happy hour or like session like look like, or what do you guys do like outside of the role. I think those are equally as important questions, and I think that interviewers also like getting asked that, because so many interviews go the same that when you actually ask the interviewer to talk about something that they're passionate about and they will light up talking about like something they love, then I feel like that also reflects well on you.
Yeah, definitely. And you can just get to know somebody a little bit better when you open it up and have like a more conversation, like more of a conversation versus just like, a robotic interview process. I think it, makes it a little more light and you get to know the person a little bit better.
Wow. Okay. So since you've been in PR now for a while, I know the social media industry, and I feel like everything kind of has changed a lot since COVID. And I'm curious to know, what are some trends you're seeing right now in PR?
Yeah, I don't know that it's more like how we do PR, I'd say has changed a lot. So even from when I first interned to now, the spray and pray approach where you're building these massive media lists and you're pitching a ton of people an announcement or a story was still very much a thing. And I'd say like now with just how crazy the media is, how like limited of a window there is to kind of secure an opportunity and to get a story out there, I think focusing more on quality over quantity has really become important in the last few years. So, making sure when you have something that you want to pitch media that you're really doing the research and you're really curating every single pitch so that it's super personalized and it's really thoughtful, and, remembering that, we're reaching out to real people. So, you want to have like a really personalized and really thought out pitch that isn't just like, mass sent out to a bunch of people. So I think that's going to help you really secure the best types of stories. It's going to increase your chances of getting responses from media versus, like I said, that older approach where you're just kind of blasting people and it's like spam, and, no one wants to get spam emails or ones that look like mass created it and sent it to a bunch of people. So I'd say just thinking about quality of the work that you're doing. I'd also say digital PR is becoming a lot bigger. So not just the traditional like pitching reporters, but especially in the in-house role, we do a lot more on the digital PR side with like working with like our organic search team or, whoever it is that helps run your SEO. So making sure that we're being thoughtful about the content we're creating, we're putting the right keywords in, when we're creating content for our newsroom, we're helping making sure that everything's optimized correctly. So I think those types of things are coming more into play, where it used to just be a lot more of like that traditional approach of secure a story, see it run, okay, move on to the next one. So there's just a lot more like cross team collaboration, I'd say, in like a PR in-house role where, you have to be really strategic on how you're working with other teams so you can figure out how you can get the most brand awareness on all fronts.
Is there a PR campaign that you worked on throughout your career that you are most proud of?
So I'm actually working on one right now. I can't say too much about it, but basically it's a global issue study. We have a really cool partner lined up. It's going to be a really great piece of intellectual property. We're doing a couple events as well with media offering it exclusively and tying a bunch of like social and other promo around it. So really excited about that. That will come out in the fall. So I can share more later on, but
that's teasing us.
Yeah.
What makes it your favorite, or what are the things about a campaign that get you really excited about it?
I think when it's something you're really passionate about. So it's something I guess that's really specific for me, at least at Semrush, is because we have a ton of different data capabilities. We're helping all different kinds of businesses, is that we're able to craft really unique stories that aren't just, about marketing. We can talk about issues that matter in the world, or fashion trends, or food. And so there's just like a really big variety of what we can do. And so I think just thinking outside of the box and figuring out how you can be as creative as possible and how you can really put your passion into whatever the campaign is that you're working on. I think that could help make for a good campaign. I'd say also not being afraid to experiment and think a little bit outside of the box. So, there's a million people out there doing campaigns and pitching media. And so don't be afraid to kind of step outside of, the traditional way of thinking. And those are going to be the ideas that are going to get more attention than, the 50 other basic ideas that are going through people's inboxes every day in the media.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to hopefully see once your campaign launches what it is. It definitely sounds, I feel like there's a lot of moving parts, so that sounds very exciting and fun to work on.
Yeah,
So,
it's going to be exciting.
yay. So looking back on your career, we've kind of talked a little bit about what you've learned and how you got here, but you're now in a senior manager role and you've been in the industry for a little while. What is the most important lesson you've learned while working in PR?
I would say to be patient. I think, especially with how fast paced PR can be, you're always kind of moving, staying on top of the news. But I think remembering that being patient is really critical to the entire process. So, what I mean by that is like, I could spend hours crafting an idea and it could be the most perfect pitch. And I have all these reporters that are like a great fit and they could just never answer me. And I could be, going about it weeks and weeks. And, it's easy to get discouraged in PR when you're not getting results right away. And I think just remembering that it takes time to really come up with a thoughtful idea and find the right people. And, the entire process is not just going to be overnight. So I think just being really patient, because if you put the work in and you're strategic about what it is that you're doing, the results will come later on. And I know it's kind of tricky too when like you need to show results to leadership.
Your boss, yeah.
Yeah, you need to get metrics. But I think just even being able to provide the context of like the media cycle's crazy, or like this news just broke, so these reporters aren't going to be open to covering the story for a few weeks. So I think just helping explain to other people kind of the PR process, but also just remembering on your own end not to get discouraged if, you're not getting something the first time you're pitching it. Maybe you have to go back and figure out, a different approach or a new way of going about pitching it so that it does land. And, maybe you have to find a new set of reporters or add a different set of data to the pitch so that it sounds better, it's more compelling. So I think just not being afraid to take a step back and try new things, and not be too hard on yourself if something's not happening immediately.
I love that advice. I am not so patient. So I'm always struggling with that one. Did you think you were patient coming into it, or is it a skill that you've had to work on?
No, I don't know. I don't know if I am even patient, but I feel like it's definitely something I had to learn, because especially when
Yeah.
you're starting out, you can get discouraged pretty quickly when you're like putting all this time and effort into something, and then you're like, expecting to be on the front of Wall Street Journal with your story, and you're like, oh, why didn't they pick it up? But I think, yeah, just like it's something that happens over time where like you have to constantly remind yourself, like, okay, I'm putting the work in, like there's other factors that are going into this. It's not just because I sent a pitch and it didn't land. So
Yeah.
I think it's definitely something you're like constantly working on doing, and that comes with time.
I feel like that's with anything good in life. It requires patience. I always remind myself that with like me with Sky Society and me wanting to grow my business so fast. And just like, okay, like the reality is like not everybody becomes overnight successes like you may see online. And I can imagine it's very similar with PR, where you want to write the story and you're like, I want it in all of the headlines, but it's also like over time you will become better at what you do. And over time, the stories will become better, and all of it, unfortunately, just requires a lot of patience.
Yep.
Well, Jenna, this has been so much fun. I have one last question for you to wrap up our episode, and that is, what advice would you give to someone who is starting out in a career in PR or who wants to have a career like yours?
Yeah, I would say, prior to getting into a role, really work on networking and don't be afraid to reach out. So a lot of, the opportunities I've gotten is through people that I've met or people that I've reached out to. So I would say, like, don't ever shy away from that. If, there's a job you really have your eyes set on, figure out who the team is that you'd potentially be working with if there's a job opening, and really do your research and, try to make those connections. And even if you might not get a job immediately, maybe down the line, that's another connection you can go back to. I might also say, once you're in a role, is to really be proactive. I think that's the biggest thing, showing the people that you're working with that you're constantly coming up with new ideas, and, raise your hand if there's an opportunity to take on more work. Obviously, if, you have the bandwidth, but, raise your hand for things, and don't be afraid, even if it's something that you think seems scary or seems out of your, area of expertise. I think just showing that proactiveness and being eager and excited is what's going to really help you long term to build a really strong PR career.
Yeah, I think that one thing that I always like keep coming back to is that, being relentless and passionate and driven and hardworking never goes out of style. And so you combine that with patience, like we talked about, and I think that you're on to a very successful career. Well, Jenna, thank you again for coming on the Sky Society podcast. This has been so much fun. I love getting to dive into PR and the industry and hearing all about how you abandoned a nursing career to pursue PR. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.